The economic crisis in Russia is so severe that Putin is now banning Russians from leaving the country. You see, some of Russia's biggest companies have started mass layoffs just to survive, creating exactly the kind of crisis Putin can't handle. So, to stop Russians from blaming him for his struggles, Putin has implemented a shocking new rule on Kremlin TV. The word recession is now officially banned.
But this political panic is not working, as millions of Russians head for the borders in search of work in other countries. Putin is now desperate enough to ban citizens from leaving Russia. The reason behind this is simple. He needs those men to feed his failing army. It seems Putin has only one solution to every problem: tyranny.
Putin started something he can't finish, and now Russian citizens are suffering for it. Russia's economic spiral continues, with 60 employees of a power plant threatening mass suicide by jumping off buildings after months without pay. As situations like this spread across the country, even Kremlin loyalists in the Russian media can't avoid talking about the economic crisis in their imagined reality.
In this imaginary reality, there are no two down quarters. The word recession is a bad word. No, it's worth arguing about. Of course it's worth arguing about. But talk to any business and they will tell you how they are doing today. Isn't it great? Wouldn't it be great? Everything is great. Everything is great. And when they start laying off people, they will say, "What do you want from me? Am I responsible for inflation?" Well, then again, maybe someone will run off and complain about me again. But you better come here and share your opinion. Welcome! I invite you all the time, but I understand you are better than that. Who are we really? Why should people understand anything? I guess I will listen to Putin for once. Don't call it a recession, call it a holiday. And that might actually be the right word for what we're talking about. That's because you see a lot of Russian companies, even state-owned ones, giving their employees extra but mandatory days off. The only bad part is that these days off are unpaid. Let's start with Russia's largest employer, Russian Railways. They employ about 700,000 people, and now they're asking their employees to take 3 extra days off at their own expense. Technically, this isn't a layoff, but people will be making less money because of it. Why are they doing this? Well, the reason is simple. They're losing money because of the widespread drop in demand. You see, Russian Railways is often seen as a mirror of the Russian economy. Whenever Russia's resource industry is doing well, demand for rail transport is high. But whenever Russia's resource industry suffers, railways suffer as well. So consider the industries that the Russian economy depends on. The coal industry, which employs about 150,000 people, has been hit hard by falling exports and low prices. According to Russia's deputy prime minister, 30 companies in the industry, employing about 15,000 people, are at risk of bankruptcy. On top of that, the industry as a whole is not doing well. Net losses are double what they were for the whole of last year, and 65% of companies are unprofitable. The same thing is happening in the steel industry. Last year, Russia was the 5th largest steel producer in the world, and this year, companies are on the verge of bankruptcy. The situation is so serious that the Russian government is considering allowing them to suspend debt payments to avoid bankruptcy. And of course, we cannot forget the giant of the Russian resource industry, the oil and gas sector. Now, as you may have seen, Ukrainian drones, Ukrainian sanctions, are hitting the oil and gas companies hard. When refineries catch fire, employees often do not come to work, and they are not paid for that time, which is problematic in a country where the prices of basic goods are skyrocketing. Well, now even the Russian media is starting to pay attention to something that Putin doesn't talk about, namely Russia's oil economy. Just look at what a Russian newspaper said just last week. Moskovsky Kamerez. Why do we keep trying to create the illusion that everything is fine, talking to the public as if they were little children? I'm talking about gasoline or about the fact that the debris from the Ukrainian drone did not affect production at the refineries. Only after Trump mentioned that Russians were lining up for gasoline did the Russian national press begin to acknowledge these cues.
Meanwhile, the cooling of the Russian economy is causing problems. The headline reads, "How much does bait cost?" These are tough times, you know. They're not easy. According to the State Statistics Service, Russia's GDP growth slowed from 4.5% year-on-year in the fourth quarter of 2024 to 1.4% in the first quarter and to just 1.1% in the second quarter. In January-March, wholesale trade fell 4% year-on-year. Water supply indicators fell 2%. Mining, which accounts for about 15% of Russia's GDP, fell 1%. In the first half of the year, freight transport revenue fell 0.3% year-on-year. In particular, rail freight fell 6.6%, and the index for seaports fell 5.4%. All of this is a direct consequence of the decline in the mining and manufacturing industries that are most important for Russia. Russia's problems aren't isolated to the resource industry right now. Russian automakers are struggling just as much. The Gori automobile plant, which employs 20,000 people, and Avtovaz, Russia's largest automaker, which employs about 40,000, have both switched to a 4-day work week. Now, that sounds like a great deal, but in reality, they're doing it because sales are back down, and they can't afford to pay that many people. So instead of laying off people, they're just shifting them to a reduced workload. That way, they have to pay them less. A great accounting trick to cut costs without having to lay people off. Now, all of this is bad, but even some of Russia's allies are starting to turn against Putin. This is something we mentioned in a previous video, but Kazakhstan has recently started enforcing Western sanctions on its borders. That means that trucks carrying sanctioned goods from China can't just roll into Russia. But that's creating a secondary effect where a lot of Russian businesses that depend on just-in-time deliveries are now stuck with empty shelves and nothing to sell. There are also some businesses that we've seen that have to go to Russian courts or declare bankruptcy because they have what they need from these trucks to fulfill their contracts. But now they can't fulfill those contracts in time, and that's causing legal problems. As you can see, life is really difficult for Russians. They are laid off. They cannot find new jobs. If they have jobs, their wages are reduced or they are not paid at all. Meanwhile, they cannot start a business because the supply chain is completely messed up. What does a normal person do in a situation like this? Well, they want to go to a better place. This is when Putin said, "No, you can't do that, my friend." Putin banned hundreds of thousands of Russians from leaving the country. The reason behind this ban was simple. Putin needed men to feed his hungry army, and that meant they couldn't leave the country. Just weeks ago, Putin signed one of the largest conscription orders since the invasion began. He ordered 135,000 Russians into military service. Now, this is where I want to give you a little background on how military service works in Russia. You see, the conscripts that Putin is signing up for can't actually be sent to the front lines. That's because Russia hasn't declared war on Ukraine. That means they can't be in active combat or even leave Russia's borders. For Russia, this is just a special military operation, and that means Putin has to get creative to get these conscripts to the front lines. Well, don't worry. This is exactly what Putin learned in his KGB days. How to get things out of people they don't want to give them to you. Putin ordered his Russian commanders to use their persuasive skills on these young conscripts to get them to sign up to volunteer for the front lines. These persuasive skills included your usual KGB tactics, threats, torture, and even kidnapping. After all of this, most conscripts willingly signed up and became contract soldiers. When they did, their lives were in Putin's hands. But there is something positive in all this. As we have been saying all this time, any soldier who joins Russia's war against Ukraine gets millions of rubles in bonuses and for fighting. They become millionaires literally overnight. In fact, it was part of the promotion to get some volunteers to come to the door of the military building and sign a contract of their own free will. But you see, as former President and General Eisenhower once said, a Russian promise is not worth a penny. Well, these Russian soldiers found that out the hard way. Listen to this from a Russian soldier. Money. Where is the damn money? A few years ago, I sent a message to the militia that we should make some money. They promised me that your pockets would be full of gold. Now, on the contrary, it's all in pieces. Besides, you also borrowed from the reserve banks, $700,000. Every day they call me and ask for my money, but I don't have any money. My wife tells me, you're not paying back, you're out of cash. I've been missing for 24 days in a row. I gave 12 million rubles to my wife and children. Millions. They said they come 3 times a day. If he dies, I'll give them the money. When you go to hell, it doesn't matter anymore. Why did he get married? Better make him out of a tree, but at least let him sit in a house. So that's why you signed this contract? Yeah, damn. Well, as stories like this started to spread across the villages, Russia's military drafts plummeted, so Putin implemented a new strategy. As you can see from the clip on your screen, the Russian police are now just picking people up off the sidewalks of Russia and sending them to the front lines. And they have a bit of an incentive to do this. Putin announced a $1,130 bonus for all police officers, FSB agents, National Guardsmen, prosecutors, and even prison guards for every civilian they can force to join the army. Now, this is a huge incentive, and just to put this into context, the starting salary for a Russian police officer is about $300 a month. A mid-level police officer gets about $500 to $800, and then senior police officers or even some officers in big cities get $800 a month. But on the other hand, they can get almost $1,100 just to convince a civilian to join this fight. That's a pretty big incentive. But the problem is that Putin may not be able to deliver on his promises. As President Trump once said, you need 3 things to win a war: money, money, money. And it seems Russia is running out of all 3.
On the war map, the line between offense and defense is blurring. Russia's moves are still largely unknown, while Ukraine, exhausted as it is, seems to be preparing for something bigger than the world has ever seen. Reports from the front suggest that a brutal winter may be approaching. No one knows exactly who is controlling the battle, only that all sides are calculating in silence. Behind the diplomatic statements are secret moves, plans never made public. And with each passing day, the world moves closer to a new dangerous threshold. Is this just the lull before the storm, or the beginning of an escalation not seen since World War II? The answer, perhaps, will soon be revealed. We will continue to monitor and update the latest developments. Don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes just one news you miss today can be the turning point of the whole war tomorrow.